And we are reconvened in open session. We have no action on closed session items, so we will move on to item 10, board members' reports. We will start with our activity report. Ms. Helliger.
Thank you, Madam President. So this month we've been busy as normal, and we start off with the Briargate Edge Career Day, Fort Bend ISD Partnership Luncheon, Fort Bend ISD Secondary Co-Teach Reception, Richpoint High School FFA Banquet, Fort Bend Edge Foundation 25th Anniversary Reception, Heritage Road Elementary School Talent Show, Richpoint High School Masterworks Choir Concert, New Opportunity for China-U.S. Cooperative Luncheon, the Barber Awards, Academic Decision Day, Project Search Graduation, Fort Bend ISD Graduations, Closing the Opportunity Gap by Speaker Pedro Negrero, TASB Post-Legislative Conference, TASB SLI Conference, Fort Bend Chamber State of Higher Education, Go Public Gulf Coast Meeting, our Community Salutes event honoring graduates joining the military, Greater Houston Partnership, Houston's Global Economic Summit, Travis High School Baseball Playoff Games, and the field graduation. And one that's not on here, you all went to the Missouri City Juneteenth celebration.
Thank you. We sure did. Thank you, Ms. Helliger. We don't want to leave anything off. Thank you very much. Before we move on to special reports, I would like to thank Mrs. James for going to the Travis High School graduations at the baseball game, at the baseball field. That is a special event, and it's a neat thing for them to get to do, and I'm really glad that one of us was able to make that. So thank you for going to that.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. If I can just respond, I'd also just an extension like to thank my husband for driving me all the way there and staying there into the evening. But it was very exciting, and exciting for the boys, and particularly exciting for Mrs. Diaz, who is a huge baseball fan.
Very good. Well, thank you. So we'll move on to special reports, and I think, Mrs. James, you have a special report this evening.
Yes, I do. I'd like to report, I attended the Greater Houston Partnership Houston's Economic Summit, or global, let me say the right words, Global Economy Summit, pardon me, in May. And I went because for part of the day there was a panel, and the panel included Renu Couture, the president of U of H and the chancellor of the U of H system, Manola Sanchez, the chairman of the BBVA Compass, and Jean-Francois Poupard, who's the executive vice president for corporate development and communication for Schlumberger. So Schlumberger, of course, has a huge presence here in Fort Bend County and has donated a lot to our school district, or to our education foundation, and U of H, of course, has a presence here as well. So that was what initially drew my interest. The Greater Houston Partnership is sort of Houston's answer to the Chamber of Commerce, and they've evolved into this partnership to make it sort of a regional organization to talk about regional issues. And I just want to relay to my fellow trustees and to administrators in the community a theme that kept coming up during the day, and that is that the development and growth of Houston's economy in a regional sense requires quality schools, and particularly the public school system. A quote by Chancellor Couture was, "We need to," quote, "pay attention to the K-12 schools." The executive from Schlumberger went on to talk about how large companies want their employees, who are generally well educated, to want to move to our region and then be able to find housing with easy access to quality schools. Quote, "Public schools are important to bringing industry and employees to the region," end quote. We've seen evidence of this belief by large companies in Fort Bend ISD. We've experienced donations from many large businesses in our community, particularly Schlumberger, as I mentioned before. Fluor has been a steady donor, and many others that we could identify that volunteer both their time and their money to our school district. And I wanted to bring this to our attention tonight so that we can be encouraged to seek businesses in our collaboration efforts and recognize the value we add to them in their recruiting efforts. At the same time, they can receive, we can receive value from them. I guess it goes both ways, is what I'm trying to say. As the board continues to ask the administration to seek collaboration opportunities, we can do so with confidence when we recognize the mutually beneficial results.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Thank you for that report, and especially thank you for attending that on our behalf. We appreciate that. It's very good information and good for us to be represented there. Mr. Burdine, did you have something?
Yes, Madam President. I'd like to give a 2014 bond and facilities update to the board. So there is a huge long list of items that would take us some time to go through, but I wanted to give a brief overview here that the Fort Bend ISD Design and Construction and Jacobs are in the third year of the 2014 bond program, and construction is well underway, as we know. By the beginning of the new school year, 3 new elementary schools will be completed, along with life cycle and deficiency work at campuses all across the district. In addition to the bond work right now, Fort Bend Facilities and Operations Department are busy cleaning campuses across the district, making repairs, painting that cannot be completed during their school year. Additionally, the Facilities Department is assisting with the relocation of portable buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine, and we appreciate you continuing to play that role and to update the board. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mrs. Tassan. This is a moment of personal privilege, but I want to make 2 brief comments. Like my colleagues, I'm very proud that we have earned the HEB Board of the Year. We were one of 5 finalists. 2 of those finalists, one was Hurst Euless Bedford, which Faye Ballou is a member of that board. She's a former past TASB president. And Schurz Cibolo Universal City. Gary Inman is a member of that board. He's the current board president. He's a past TASB board president. So I would consider them stiff competition. But I would also say, and I really appreciate having this as a nice reminder of the effort that it took all of us, not just the board, but the superintendent, the administration, and every teacher in Fort Bend ISD to earn this. And really happy to have it, but it's a past event now, and we got to move on. We got to earn our wings every day. So I just wanted to say that. Number 2, we were just in San Antonio this past weekend, or this past week, and we all attended the post-legislative conference, and we had a guest speaker, Joe Strauss, Speaker of the House. And so I want everybody to know that he called Mrs. Tassan out by name and complimented her on her many op-ed pieces. And so it's been kind of a whirlwind spring, because the triumvirate of the Texas legislature, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker all know Mrs. Tassan by sight and by name and by reputation.
I don't know if that's such a good thing, Mr. Rice.
Well, so I want everyone to know that she's been advocating very hard on behalf of public education. And I hope that all of our teachers appreciate her advocacy. But more than that, I hope all of our teachers will vote. If all of our teachers will vote, if all of our teachers will apprise themselves of the character of the onslaught against us and vote, it will be for the better. Because if they don't, nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I really appreciate your kind words, and I would second that, that the only way we're going to really get the attention of those in Austin is if we really get our teachers and those that it impacts every single day to the polls and to be one voice. So thank you very much for that. Just to wrap, does anyone have anything else? Just to wrap up, I just wanted to recognize the fact that our board and some of our executive team members made 3 presentations at TASB Summer Leadership Institute, and I'm very proud of that, that we were able to do that. We have transitioned now from being a learning board, although we are still learning every single day, which was one of our profile of a graduate traits here in Fort Bend ISD, but we are now a teaching board. And I'm very proud to say that we had 3 teams go to the Summer Leadership Institute in San Antonio and present on internal audit. Mrs. James and Mr. Rice gave our second presentation on the internal audit committee and its workings. We also had a team go and present on special education, which was Ms. Helliger, myself, Dr. Saavedra, Dr. Hill, and Dr. Dupree. And so that was a very well-received presentation. It's the first time we did that one, and I thought it was excellent, if I do say so myself. I think there were a lot of district board members and superintendents who could use it. And so I hope that they take it back and do use that information. And then finally, our Vision and Planning Committee went on the road and presented how to get where you're going. And that was led by our chair of the Vision and Planning Committee, Mrs. James, Ms. Helliger, myself, and Dr. Dupree. And I think that was another presentation that was very well received. We had a lot of good questions in that session. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the board and to the executive team members. And even though Ms. Martinez wasn't there with us, she helped us quite a bit on that presentation and helps us quite a bit on the Vision and Planning Committee. So I wanted to give a shout out to those team members as well. So thank you for all your hard work in helping us prepare for that and traveling to help us present. I really do think it makes a difference for us to do things like that. So, all right, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone that wants to remove anything from the consent agenda? May I have
Madam President, I think we need to remove item 11A because we have a revision to it.
Okay. Any others?
We're removing from consideration item D2A, an agreement between Fort Bend ISD and Baker Ripley.
That's correct. Thank you, Dr. Dupree. So with those changes, may I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda in its entirety with the exception of item 11A and item 11D2 as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Ms. Helliger. Do we have discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to offer clarification and then a comment or question. I can't see you, so I'm assuming you're recognizing.
Mrs. James, go ahead.
You want me to move?
No, that's all right. First of all, the item we're not addressing is item 11D2A. But we are under considering 2B.
Correct.
Okay. And then my next comment is with regard to the committed fund balance. What did we decide, if anything, on the accountability plan for this? Or did we talk about how we're going to be updated about our changes in spending or use of the fund? Or what did we decide? Or did we decide anything? Mr. Bassett.
Thank you. Ms. James, I think the next chance that we'd have to talk about it would be whenever we bring the budget amendment in September, as we usually do, that we have the PO roll forward, that process that we have on the annual basis. That's the first time we have a budget amendment. And so at that time, we'd be able to have at least a couple months in our belt in terms of being able to look at the year, how it's progressing. It's a little early for an update of the forecast, but we will look at that. But I think at that time, I think we should be able to speak about some of the strategies that we're putting in place to save money. So I think that'd be good timing.
Okay, well, that would be good, and I guess that would be my expectation that you would keep us updated so that we can be apprised, because I'm not a big fan of the deficit budget concept, and so I want to be diligent about knowing what lengths we're going to you know, figure out the path forward, I guess. So I'll look forward to regular updates.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. James. If we don't have further discussion, please vote. Motion passes. We will now consider item 11A. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve item 11A as it's been placed at our seats.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion?
Well, I'd only like to comment that I apologize that we didn't catch this sooner, and it kind of became an 11th hour conversation. So the main revision here is adding the second objective there to cover all parts of Goal 2.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Moving on to action items. Item 12A, consideration for approval for the General Fund, Debt Service Fund, and Child Nutrition Fund budgets. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move the recommended action.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Here, do we have discussion? Yes or no?
Well, I guess I just want to reiterate, I asked for some information about how this is aligning to our priorities over the week, and I appreciate kind of a long list of things that were given that aligns to our priorities. But I guess the counter question to that is, what are we eliminating? And it's a little bit of a rhetorical question, and maybe that's not something we can get into tonight, but I feel like I just want to be confident that we're spending our money wisely, and that we are eliminating those things that aren't heading us in the direction of our priorities.
Thank you, Mrs. James. And thank you for your questions, because I read all of those emails and the responses, so I appreciate them. Nothing else? Mr. Rosenthal?
I would like to echo what Ms. James just said. Excuse me. It's like we brought up last week. We know we're going to have to cut some things. So I guess something for the administration to consider is at what point will they start looking for things that need to go away? I know we've done some program evaluations on a couple things. We don't need to bring some of that up right now. I wasn't completely convinced some of that stuff, but when will we have more program evaluations? Can we prioritize some of those things? Or can we prioritize some of those evaluations to things that maybe are on the bubble, maybe we're not so sure about whether they're working, so that we can get those decisions quickly and not drag it out till next May when we're looking at another deficit and we have to dig into more fund balance.
So there's actually, the program evaluation is one strategy we're using. We're also using, you've heard us refer to the resource allocation team. They've already begun work, probably, they've been working all year really to develop some strategies, knowing, because we were being proactive even before we learned the budget picture, because we're dedicated to the idea that we've got to put all of our money toward our strategic objectives. So we're using the resource allocation team, and we plan to get into much more, I guess, explanatory with the board about what that is during the coming months as we get into the fall. We've also got the Budget and Compensation Committee that will weigh in heavily on the types of things you're asking about. So Steve and I have had several meetings about our strategy, and a lot of what we'll do, frankly, is get some good collaboration between principals, teachers, central admin, and start really putting all on the wall, just throwing everything to the wall about what, what are we getting value of, what are we not, what are legitimate ways we could save money. And then do a lot of work around the quantification, the dollars, and the impact on the organization. So we will be bringing all that forward in chunks as we do our work. But what you and Mrs. James have addressed is definitely, those are the things that are on our list for the coming months to start addressing.
Okay, so that sounds good, and I hope that, because a lot of times when we've asked teachers, well, there's only a certain level of teachers that get asked, and it doesn't go very deep into the organization. So I hope that all of them are engaged in that process, because I think that's where you're going to get a lot of your valuable information.
Mm-hmm.
So
It'll be a very public and collaborative process.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Okay, please vote. Please vote.
Can I just say one other thing? And that is that during the special session of the legislature, school finance and school finance reform isn't on the agenda, so they're not going to be working on that. And anything that comes out of that special session is going to be costing us money. So I just want to be mindful of that, because we could have more unfunded mandates than we already face at the end of the special session.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Please vote. Motion passes. Now for consideration, item 12B, the defined electrical easement between Fort Bend ISD and CenterPoint Energy. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move the recommended action as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Now for consideration, item 12C, approval of the Gibson Consulting Group to perform internal audits. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move the recommended action as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Now for consideration, item 12E, approval of the membership in Go Public Gulf Coast. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the action item 12E as presented.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Now for consideration, item 12F, approval of appointing trustee Grail James to represent Fort Bend ISD as the district's voting delegate for Go Public Gulf Coast. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the recommended item as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have discussion? Go ahead, Mrs. James.
I'd just like to say thank you for considering me, and I will serve well alongside of Dr. Dupree's designee, who has been the last few months Mrs. Sofer, and it's been a good partnership. So thank you for your confidence in me, and we will continue to positively promote public education in the Gulf Coast region.
Thank you, Mrs. James, for being willing to serve and for representing Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees well. We appreciate you. Okay, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item 13, review of future board meeting agenda items.
Yes, ma'am. On the near term, in July, we have one meeting, so we're going to be working hard to get you information. It'll be after the district is closed, though, so we'll get that to you, and we'll just need to engage with you as best we can in reviewing the memos and your questions in preparation for the one meeting without an agenda review workshop. On that evening, July 17th, we are going to do a an update on the special education inclusion co-teach a program that we implemented this past year, as well as present 3 internal audits: safety and security, bond program management audit, monitoring, and job site safety. There's also a wide variety of bond program and other MOUs and contracts and purchasing items for approval that we'll present. I don't see the need to read that list to you. Then there's just a lot of other stuff. You can see we're getting a little lean as we get into the fall, but we'll be working with Mrs. Tassan to kind of develop the reporting structure and management oversight reports and things like that as we move into the fall.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Do we have questions from the trustees?
Yes, Madam President.
Mrs. James.
This is just an item that we might want to consider. I didn't see it on this list, and I meant to bring it up earlier in the meeting. But we need to update the superintendent evaluation instrument at all? And I know we've sort of narrowed our focus, and then we're kind of looking at redoing our, we've got new goals that we've just approved. So I just want to get ahead of that because, we already obviously have something for the summative evaluation in October, but if we're going to change that at all, we need to be proactive on that for the year.
Yes, ma'am. We are working on that. That's part of the governance committee's role.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I didn't know it.
Thanks for asking. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that this meeting is adjourned.
We are adjourned. Did anybody second that? Second. 8:25, just for the record.